what we are doing now is we want to show you what happens with your data submission after, yes, pressing the submit button. First of all, you should know that the data publication in PANGAEA is similar to a paper publication. So it's a real review process, and it's a ping pong between our team and the authors. You will see that there are several teams involved in this process. You will be contacted with in contact with the editor-in-chief together with the editorial team, and you will be contacted also by the PANGAEA editors. What's more or less a little bit in the background is our technical team, which supports each submission by providing any kind of software related to PANGAEA and its web pages and web services. Please keep in mind, the responsible author and the data submitter is involved in these processes. You will get notification in your submission ticket and also via email. And also keep in mind, it's not an easy file upload and it's deposited somewhere, or with other words, it's not a fire and forget. So what's a real publication workflow? What we have done yesterday is we prepared a really good submission, and the publication starts with the submitting the data to PANGAEA. Each data submission is checked by our team of the editor-in-chief and the editorial team. This is the first editorial review. What we do here is we review the topic of the data sets, metadata completeness, file formats. We are not doing a scientific review of the data. This is beyond our competence and should be left to the authors and scientific reviewers. You will be contacted with the results of the first review. Best case is your submission is accepted for publication in PANGAEA. Now the next review starts. Your submission will be handled to one of our editors, and the data processing starts. Your data sets and metadata will be converted to the PANGAEA formats, and you will be contacted by the editor whenever questions arise. In the end of this process, you will get a link to prove your data sets. It's really important that you prove your data sets. It's like proving a paper or a paper manuscript. We are expecting suggestions for corrections or improvements of your data sets. Corrections and improvements are integrated into your data by the editor of our PANGAEA team. When the data set is finished, it will be published and you will receive a full data citation with DOI. And this citation should be added to your papers whenever you are citing your data. So let's see what happens in this first review process. You see that we have 3 scenarios. And the best way is that you have learned from this session here how to prepare your data and metadata, and you will end up on the left side with a really good data submission. Everything is perfect. Your topic is perfect for PANGAEA. All metadata and data are available, and what we are doing is we check everything. We say, yes, we will take it, and you will, or your submission will be assigned to the PANGAEA editorial. This is more or less a cure for further processing, something like a waiting position until an editor is available for your data. Please keep in mind that this process can take up to several weeks. We have a lot of data submission. Each data submission is really important, and we just try our best to do it as fast as possible. Okay, most of our data submissions are incomplete. That's why we have this course here. That's why we are telling you how you can fasten up your data submissions. Because if it's incomplete, we are doing the first review and we are checking if files, for example, are missing. And we will ask you, why are there no files? Do you have more than 20 files? Do you have really large files? Then you will get a file upload link where you can upload your larger files, or for example, your 100 files. Or Was there a bug? We will check what happened. Next is also that we are checking the metadata completeness. If they are not complete, we have to ask you for an update. The same for the data tables. We will give it back to you. And in the end, we will decide what to do with the submission. Everything is completed by you. It will go to the left side. Your data is accepted. If there's no real good feedback, or we see that we are not fitting or coming together, we have, reject your data submission. The worst case is on the right side. You submitted data, and we have in the first check seen that your data is not the topic of PANGAEA, for example, or it's such good data submissions that we say, no, we have to spend too much time to explain why we are not doing it, why we can't do it, or what to do, or no, it's a model, it's absolutely not fitting, and we reject it in this first step. So, why do we reject in this first step? Some data types cannot be displayed optimally in PANGAEA. Other repositories offer much better possibilities. This includes, for example, model data. So I just remember that we had yesterday also these questions for model data. Model data are often very huge, and we are not prepared for this kind of data. Huge data, normally you should have something like versioning, you should have a lot of information on how you generated this model. That's better displayable in specific data repositories. And you have to keep in mind, PANGAEA provides you the data and you can download the data. If you want to work with model data, it might be better to work in a cloud system and not on your own computer. That's why we say models not so good. The same is for gene sequences. There are repositories doing it much better than we, or the same for software. Some specific topics may be better displaced or better stored in some other repositories. This might be mineralogy and petrology specific data. So sometimes we see, yes, there are better repositories, and we ask you if you want to go to there because it's not the real good displayment in PANGAEA. It's the same for some seismic and earthquake data. Yes, we have such kind of data, but sometimes we see it's not the best way to publish it at PANGAEA. It's the same for museum collections. We are not the perfect place for it, and since we have a lot of repositories in the meanwhile, you can go to there and ask them to publish your data in a much better mode than we can do it in PANGAEA. And then there's a point where we say, okay, you followed not our guidelines. What we want is that we have each data set on the Earth is connected to its position on the Earth, its latitude, longitude, and what we yesterday said, we also want to know if it's in the water column or in the sediment. If you will not give it to us and say, no, I don't want it, it's not the right place to store your data in PANGAEA. We have even some special standards developed for laboratory experiments, where we can also give a lot of information about these experiments in our metadata. So this is working. Our goal is to transfer the data into the PANGAEA relational system, means that we have machine and human readable data files. So if you want to just drop some PDF documents without other metadata, it's not accepted for PANGAEA. What we need is a lot of metadata. So if you want to store, for example, some videos or some photos from OFOS or other things in the water column and on the seafloor, please give us a lot of metadata in a table together for each photo. So if you have latitude, longitude, water depth, date, time, it's perfect for PANGAEA. But if you just give other photos, it's really more or less Nothing, because we can't say when it was taken, where was it taken, and so you can't interpret these photos. And of course, what we are asking you is what we had yesterday. If you will give us a really complex Excel file with a good structure, with several tables in one sheet, with macros, with coloring, with coding, etc., maybe some graphs inside, we will say, no, that's not really displayable in PANGAEA because we want it machine readable. And we will ask you if you need all this formatting. If yes, PANGAEA is not the right place for you. So what happens if we go to the middle way? We have to ask for several more information from you. What are we doing here? First of all, we are checking the metadata. For example, we are checking the title, we are checking the abstract, event and site information. Missing, we will ask for it. The next is that we are checking it for plausibility. So if we have latitude, longitude, we are also checking if it's a real latitude and longitude. So we check if your description is fitting to what you are giving you or in the position of our event, for example. For the abstract, we are looking for the big questions. What have you measured? When, where, why, and how have you measured it? What we don't accept in the abstract is a big interpretation of your data files. We are also checking, for example, the license. Does this license fit to your data and enables the license a fair data publication? The next step is we are checking the data. As I told you before, do we have some data files? Do you need an upload link? This is the first view. The next view is what about the files? Are they usable for us? Do we have a file structure? Do we have PDF documents? Do we have in the files, for example, macros, as I told you, for color editing, graphing? That's what we will ask you to update and send it back to us. Here are some examples, what to do and what not to do. Each data set gets a real citation. So please think about a data set title. Give a full data set title, which is a really good citation, and don't do it like the paper title or data for the paper title, for example, or table 1 data. Yes, I know that you are submitting data, but what kind of data? For the abstract, sometimes we get only one sentence. This data gives Bentic forum counts for detailed C paper. Yes, not really. What we want is a full abstract for describing the data. So why? Your data publication is a publication by its own. So it should be describing itself and not understandable only together with the paper. For the license, we have only few licenses you can choose. Sometimes you will be asked for another license. The same is, for example, if we see this license CC0, we will ask if it's really your license you want to have. And maybe we will discuss if we should better use the CC BY, what is the common license for data, for example. Last but not least, we often get the reference information, something like the manuscript ID or a placeholder DOI. You see with the X, for example, in the end, it's not really working. We don't have access to all the journals, so we cannot see the authors, the title of your manuscript, for example. It's better to give us a full citation as far as you have, or if the DOE is existing for your data, for your paper, you can send us only the paper DOI. A small hint, you should check if this DOI you get from the journal is really working and it's really directed to your paper, because some journals love it to give you a placeholder DOI and we will get it and see, it's not your paper. Okay. So next step is I will check the data, or our team will check the data. And we had it yesterday. I have here some only very small examples. Again, first of all, I check if I can open the data. Next step is I will check, okay, what do I have here? So I'm just firm to Bentic foraminifera, and for example, I could see what happened here and what we have for parameters, but no one else of our team can do it. So first of all, please give full parameter names. Please of all, give the units of it. If you want to give in this sheet the information about the event, you can do it, but in a full, this full information. So you see on the left-hand side, I have sampling in November 1989. Okay, that's nice, but I just know it was on one day at one time. It's really important to give us as much metadata information as possible. If we see you have to do something, we will ask you to do it, and we will ask you to better prepare your data files. Sometimes we have to say at one point in the submission process, no, even if we ask several times to update your metadata and data, it's not really fitting to PANGAEA. That could happen if you ask for an upload link and you have only one sentence for the abstract. We do not know really what will come to us, what kind of data. Sometimes we even don't know what kind of topic. So maybe we ask you to upload the data, and in the end we say, sorry, we checked it's a model, and no, it's not for us. Same can happen if we have seen the files and we just try to get an idea, because abstract and dataset title was not really informative for us, and we have to say in the end, sorry, thanks a lot for all your work, but I think, or we think, there could be a better repository for you. Next is if we don't get a feedback or only an incomplete feedback in an acceptable time. So please stay in contact with us. If we are sending you an email, please don't wait for the next months until doing or working on your submission. That's because we have not only your submission, we have hundreds of submissions, and we have to check again and again something happened or not. So we decide at one point, no, it's taking too much time, we have to stop it. If you submit again your data files and we see that you have not followed our suggestions and we are not able to do the formatting by ourselves because it's only a small formatting, we have to stop it. We can't do this formatting for you. It's your Excel sheet or your table or your data. That's not our work. And last but not least, we sometimes have fire and forget. We will ask, and there's no feedback, and then we have to stop the submission. What we are doing is we are sending several reminders, but in the end, no feedback. We have to close the submission and reject it. But everybody is welcome to resubmit the data and the data sets after a more intense data preparation and following our guidelines. So let's assume your submission is accepted. You made it, the first step of all. What's next? As I told you before, your submission will be given to the PANGAEA editorial. This is the big waiting position for the next step. As soon as a specific subject editor is available for your data, so we know that he or she will have time enough to prepare your data, the submission will assign to this person, and he will start to prepare the data sets. It's a next step in a next more or less review process. Even here it might happen that the editor says, okay, we can't prepare the data in a fair, which ends up in a fair data publication. And I ask you several times, but sorry, it's not fitting. Even there it could happen that we have to reject the data set. But in most cases, you will get your data publication in PANGAEA. But keep in mind also at this step, please be prepared to answer all questions and actively work with the editor to get a really fast data publication in the end. Okay, and that's the point where I have to handle it to Dana, and she will tell you what happens with your data submission when it's on her table.
All right, I'll share my screen. And at this place, let's just, before we start what happens on the editor's table, let's just take one little step back and have a look at all kind of different PANGAEA components just for explanation about the environments you're going to encounter in PANGAEA while working on your data submission. Because I know from my own experience when I was a PhD student and for the first time published with PANGAEA, these all different components can be a little bit confusing for the first time users. So the power users will excuse me for a moment, but I'll just go through this slide once for those beginners. So you basically typically approach PANGAEA through the web page, PANGAEA.de, and this is an environment that takes you to different parts of PANGAEA. On one hand, you can explore the data already published with us and find data that you can maybe reuse or you can learn from. This site provides you basic information about PANGAEA as an organization, about us. Important thing is that you can submit data through the web page, and you can also on the upper right corner administer your user account, which is actually necessary for you to submit data to PANGAEA. So then you prepare your data and hit the submit button. And this is the environment of the submission form where Michael led you through yesterday during his session. So here you provide all the metadata and your files. And when you hit the submit button, the next environment is open for you. So a ticket is created. So they would have an ID, typically starting with PDI and a number. And this is nothing to do with your future DOI. So this is the ticket number. We call it tickets or we call it issues. And these issues can be by you approached by several ways. You can click a link in the email that you get once you create such a ticket. You can go directly to issues PANGAEA.de, and when you're logged in, you will see a list of your all active tickets. And if you filter, then you can also find all your old issues created with the same user. Or you can go to PANGAEA website to your account administration, and there you will be also redirected to your tickets. So through this environment, which is a little bit complicated, but it has many functions and it allows us actually effectively communicate with you and document all the data submissions and organize our work, because typically us editors have dozens tickets that we work on at the same time. So this is really very important for us for communication and managing all this work. So this green part is accessible for everyone. This orange one is only you who are involved. And now comes the part where we only have the access, and these are tools that we editors work with, and these are not accessible for you. But using these tools, we will basically take the metadata and data from your data submission and transfer it to the final storage and create a landing page of your data set, which will through this work appear online and will be immediately findable through the web of PANGAEA. So at the first time when the data appears online, actually only the metadata will be findable for everyone. And during the review process of your data set, only you as authors and us, obviously, will have access to the actual data behind it. And there is one more environment which is available for you through different places in PANGAEA, and that's the wiki that we also talked about yesterday, which provides you with help with submission preparation, maybe answers some of your frequent questions, standard operation procedures, and templates. Also, there is an internal part for us editors to work in a standardized way. Okay, and I'll have a look now a little bit more in detail into this red part, what happens in editorial system. What happens during the editorial work. So what we do is that we don't have a magic wand, but we have kind of standard data processing tools. And we have one specialized tool, which is the client that allows us with a graphical user interface to communicate with PANGAEA database. And this is our daily tool, so daily work tool. And what we do is that we take the metadata from the data submission and from the ticket and connect it with data. We standardize and harmonize the metadata with those that are already existing in PANGAEA database. In ideal case, we don't really need to do any editing on the data level. If you follow all the, let's say, instructions and use the templates and so on. And sometimes this is needed. So either if it's really lots, we will ask you to do the job. We'll give you the submission back and ask for a new version. Sometimes if that takes more time to ask you to correct things, we do it ourselves. Maybe standardize some formats, parameters units conversion. So for example, all the depths in sediments we have in meters, but it is in some communities common to use centimeters instead of meters, so we do these conversions ourselves. Yes, and then comes the next part. So maybe a little interlude. So if you, during this editorial process, which sometimes takes weeks and even months, realize that there is something that you need to change in your submission, you can do it ideally through the ticket. So you open your ticket, and in the header of the ticket, there is a summary of your submission, basically what came from the submission form. And we would like to ask you to not to edit it directly in the ticket, but for editing these metadata to use this blue button, edit metadata, which basically opens the original submission form for you and allows you to change the metadata. It also allows you to add maybe some files or add some comments and then submit again. So using this is particularly suitable during the time when the data set hasn't appeared online yet. We didn't process it yet. And okay, so you can also ask for us to do changes during the later stages by scrolling down in the ticket where the whole conversation is and add a comment. So you can always comment in the ticket. And also keep in mind that whatever changes you do in this ticket or in the submission form will not automatically translate into what appears online on the PANGAEA dataset landing page, because you have seen that everything that ends up in the database must be pushed there through us editors. Okay, so once we have created this landing page of the dataset based on your data, we'll send you a link, and the proofread stage starts. So we will ask you to go to this link and have a look at the metadata, check, for example, all the names, if they're all names are spelled out, because we also use like some automatism, some tools to transfer these metadata from the ticket, and they are not 100% bulletproof. And so in the end, what appears online is what counts counts, and it's also the author's submitter's responsibility to check that the version that is actually published online is a correct one. Oftentimes, it is very important to check if the parameter full names are correct and if the units are correct. But also when we do some data level changes, we normally inform you about that fact and specifically ask you to check these particular issues. All right. So, and in the end, hopefully we receive your approval to publish the data. And at this stage, you have four basic options. You can decide to either keep the data set, which is already online, in review, or you can finalize the publication. So that means that at that point, the data set is final and fully citable. If you are not sure if the data set is in its final version, it's better to keep it in a review. So this is typically the case when you have maybe an connected paper in peer review, and you still wait that you might need to incorporate some changes from the review process in the next version of the data set. So in that case, we actually recommend to keep it in review, because then the DOI isn't registered yet, and any changes and updates to the metadata and even data are possible. And it's even possible to delete a dataset in this stage. And then for both of these, either in review or published, you have two further options. You can either have it open access or access restricted. So both have their applications. For example, the peer review process might be closed, that you only have anonymous reviewers, or it can be open, and for that it's already necessary that your data set is open for everyone. And it's important to keep in mind that the metadata are always open access in PANGAEA once they appear online. And after the moratorium, which typically is not longer than 2 years, the data will be automatically published open access. Right, and so what happens in the case that you need to provide access to third parties? So this would be a typical case if you, for example, want to share the link to the data to anonymous reviewers through your journal editor, or maybe share the data with your particular colleagues who are not all the authors. Yeah, you can drop us a message through the ticket, and the editor will create a specific key for you to pass on to anyone who needs to access the data. So that's a kind of cryptic link that you click, that the user clicks, and then will be granted temporarily access to the dataset. All right, data are published in PANGAEA, and it can happen, we've seen the case many times, that still the data publication needs some changes. Maybe you find some error in the data and the data are simply wrong. Oftentimes it's only a minor problem that can be solved by just a history comment. So that's in any case, you need to contact us via, maybe if it is a long time after your publication, via contact form, or if you still find your ticket number, just write us to the ticket. And for, as I said, minor changes, we do the changes in the data set and document it with a change history, which appears in the data set. Like in this example, we changed maybe license to less restrictive one. Or if there are major changes and a completely new version is needed, we can replace the original version with a new version. With that, the original version of the dataset will no longer be open access. Typically, we close it for access. So the data cannot be downloaded, but the metadata is typically, we typically cannot delete. It will stay there forever for archival purposes, but it will not appear in PANGAEA searches directly. And if someone already has the DOI, they will, and when they use it, they will land with the old data set, but then will be informed about the new version that exists and will be redirected there. And One more information I would like to share with you is that we have different kinds of publications. So we've already discussed yesterday that a data set can be a standalone publication. So you don't really actually need to only publish data set as a supplement to a paper publication. It can just be an entity by itself. So that's the standalone citable data set. And actually, the supplement to a paper publication is exactly the same thing. It's a data set that you can and should cite anytime you use it in some further work. But the difference is that these two, paper and the data set, are actually published hand in hand. You submit the data set maybe before you submit the paper, or at the same time, and then in the data set you cite your paper, and the other way around, you correctly cite your dataset in the final version of the published paper. And sometimes you submit like many similar datasets that each table basically has in its own DOI, but we can create so-called collection, which has a DOI by its own and is and contains all these individual datasets. So we have two basic types of these collections. One is publication series. And in this publication series, all the data sets contained in the collection have basically the same format. They're a very similar table, but maybe they concern the same parameters measured at different sites during one project. And these can be then put into a kind of envelope, and that would be the publication series. Would be basically a data set that can be cited. So you can cite the data set by all together at the same time altogether. A different cases. Another example would be maybe an open publication series, when you would have a time series of some measurements, and you would add monthly tables to this collection, and can edit or every time you have new data. And then we have another case, bundled publications, when as it is characterized by different color of these data sets, so that the tables are actually not the same, but they cannot be published as independent publications because they are interconnected. They actually don't make sense on its own. They only make sense when in this collection. So an example might be, for example, that you have in one table chronology for a sediment core, so dating, and from that calculated accumulation rates. And in another table, you have maybe concentrations of chemicals that were measured in the sediment, and from that calculated accumulation rates. But for this calculation, you actually need these datings first, so that these data wouldn't make sense to publish individually.